Founders Fridays. Today, Sam Adams. But first, before we go back to it, earlier this week I told you about the Puerto Rico vote that would put them on the possible path to statehood. I told you it was a power grab. Last night after my show, that measure passed. It passed the House. Next week, we'll tell you more about the Tennessee plan, and it still has to go through the Senate. A new progressive plan for power beyond your wildest imagination. Plus, more on Crime, Inc., all next week. But today, Sam Adams, David Barton, author of Lives of the Signers of the Declaration of Independence, and Ira Stoll. He is former managing editor of the New York Sun, author of a fascinating book, Samuel Adams, A Life. And I have to real quick say, Russ, you're in the audience. You were a guy who came up to me, I believe, at a book signing. No, where were we? Book signing.
Yes, sir.
And you handed me a book, and you said to me, if I'm remembering, you said to me, "You are our Sam Adams." And I said, "Thank you." And I was bluffing because I knew very little about Sam Adams. And I was thinking he must be an alcoholic because I knew his beer. Thank you. Yes, I am, Russ. And I read it because of you. Now, I didn't know you were going to be in the audience today. You bring me this book real quick because we got to get back to Sam Adams. You asked me to sign it. Who's this that signed this?
Bill Ayers.
William Ayers signed the book.
Yes, sir.
I'd love to buy this from you. Somebody did this to Van Jones, and I've auctioned it off for charity. But I'd like to talk to you. I pay well. Thank you very much. I'll give it back to you in a second. All right. Okay, Rafiq, let's start with you about Sam Adams.
Well, I have a confession to make. I haven't been fan of the Founding Fathers because you said, racist white males, for liberty for racist white males. Mm-hmm. And everything, but coming here, I've kind of did a little reading and realized that Sam Adams is not just a beer. My question is, historians said that Sam Adams was like incited mob violence, was master propaganda. Is any of that true? You have any comments on that?
He did the, I know the egg incident, right?
Several.
Okay,
but
tell me.
Ira's got it, but he's not directly involved. Again, he's behind, and he is able to help people move in a direction. He didn't always condone the violence, and things got out of hand at times. But Ira, go ahead.
Well, I think he was afraid that wanton violence was going to discredit the revolutionary cause. And in fact, after the Boston Tea Party, one of the first things he did was write letters to people in all over the colonies saying, "We dumped the tea, but no other property was destroyed. No one was hurt." And his critics, the British, used to try to put that label on him that he was violent, just like they do to the Tea Party people today. But, eventually there was a war, and yeah, it was violent. Mm-hmm. But until then, he was pretty careful.
Propagandist?
One thing that I think is really key is after that incident where you had people killed at the Boston Massacre, they made sure that was not a show trial. They took John Adams, Josiah Quincy, and that's the best attorneys available to defend the British. They took Robert Treat Paine, signer of the Declaration, prosecution for the state, put the best guys out there, and John Adams got the British essentially off for the shootings, except a couple of them got branded on the hand. But I mean, this was no kind of show trial, and Sam wanted to make sure justice was done.
Right.
So he's behind a lot of stuff, but not like
Tell me a little bit about, because I can't wait to do the show on African Americans in the Revolutionary War, because they're amazing. They're heroes.
They are.
But they're completely, I mean, it is all white. That's all you see in the American Revolution. Tell me about Sam Adams and where he stood on slavery. I know he was an abolitionist, but is there any story that you can tell or anything that...
One of the things that shows where he was is that people back then, if they wanted to give you a gift, they'd give you expensive gifts. Well, one of the gifts you might get was a slave. Someone might say, "Oh, here's some of my property." And Sam Adams, given slaves, instantly freed on the spot. And actually, the lady who was given to him stayed and loved him and served him. When he said, "Well, we officially need to give you manumission papers," she said, "Don't you trifle with me. I've been part of this family for too long." And so there was such a love and an equality and an attachment there with Adams' relations. But what's significant is there never was a time in Massachusetts history when blacks could not vote. You also find throughout the Revolution that's where many of the black patriots came from. So many of the black founding fathers that don't get talked about today were out of Massachusetts. And one of the best examples of how America is so different from what we hear is the Dred Scott decision. because the dissent in that decision, they said, now, the court has just said that blacks are property. The dissent written by Curtis over here said, this is nonsense. Look what blacks did in the founding. Look what blacks did in Massachusetts. Look, blacks elected to office, 1768 New Hampshire. That dissent in Dred Scott.
Say it again. Blacks elected to office in New Hampshire in
1768. And patriots. The guy who rode with Paul Revere that night, there were several, but one was a black patriot. Wentworth Cheswell rode side by side with Paul Revere. They went in different directions, but they're doing the same thing. Black and white, side by side. When you had the Battle of Lexington, 18 shot down Americans. They were black and white laying on the ground. They all went to the same church together, Reverend Jonas Clark's church. You get to the Battle of Bunker Hill. Over on the right side of the screen, the two heroes, Thomas Grosvenor and Peter Salem, black and white, fighting side by side. Salem got 14 commendations for what he did that day on Bunker Hill. Never hear that kind of stuff. But that was Massachusetts. That was Sam Adams and John Adams and those Massachusetts guys.
You'll hear more on that in coming weeks on Founders Fridays. We'll be right back in just a second. Founders Fridays today. Samuel Adams, David Barton, Ira Stoll are still here. And David, you have a question.
Yeah. Was the Continental Congress a paying job back then, or did they just do it for love of country?
They got paid for their expenses. They had per diems that they were given and travel expenses. Sam's income really came from being the clerk of the Massachusetts Assembly. As a great writer, he was not a great orator, but he was a great writer, and so he got about £100 a year for that job, which was not much, but that helped with the embroidery work that went on with his wife.
You also have to understand that that wasn't a full-time job. None of them wanted it to be a full-time job. I mean, Benjamin Franklin was very clear. You don't do this full-time. We're going to meet for a while. I mean, I guess the closest really now is Texas. Is that probably the closest is what it was? Where Texas, the legislature only meets every other year.
Every other year. Every other year, 140 days.
Yeah. I mean, you know how much damage the United States government could do if they were only here 140 days out of every 2 years? How sweet would that be? That was the idea. Who's next? Right behind you. Yes.
Yeah, I am Samuel Adams. I was named after the boy prophet, and I'm related to him. And every day I get told, oh, you're related to that beer guy. And it infuriates me. Like, there's never really a good, quick answer. Like, what's like the defining thing that he did? Because nobody knows. People say he was the president, which is, people don't know their history at all in America. So what is it? What's the one thing I say to these people? What did he do?
A couple things. One, can I respond to the beer thing? He owned what was called a malt house, and malt back then is not beer today. And by the way, that didn't do well. He didn't do well in any business he had, but he had a malt house. But according to founding father Benjamin Rush, who's called the father of temperance, he said neither malt nor wine nor beer could you get drunk on in the founding era. It had just enough alcohol to kill the bugs in the water, and that was it. So it wasn't even a beer that we consider today. That's a complete misnomer. They've stuck his name on something that really was not his. The thing you can say about him is there is no America as the United States without the leadership of Sam Adams. That's why they called him the father of the American Revolution.
It's true. You know what? There's somebody else that we'll start to introduce here in the coming weeks. George Whitefield.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. George Whitefield and Sam Adams. America doesn't exist without those two guys. George Whitefield and Sam Adams. One was a preacher from England. And this one has just had a profound belief in God. And it was, like I said at the very beginning in the story with George Washington, when Continental Congress came in and they had no faith, these guys stood up. They did two things. They gave other people the confidence and said, stand up. Stand up. God is telling us right now, this is His land. Stand up and fight for these rights. The other thing that they did, and this is critical, they explained to the American people the difference between rights in Europe and the rights here. And we're having the same discussion. It's human rights. How many people you're seeing now down at the border saying, I'm a human, I have human rights? No. No. In America, that's European. That leads to slavery. These guys understood individual rights. It's your choice, your life. You do it. Don't talk to me about human rights. That leads to Europe, and that is the key and the difference. Would you agree?
Absolutely. That's what the whole philosophy of government summarized in 45 words in the Declaration. There is a Creator. He gives rights to man, and government exists to secure the rights that he gives us.
I think I
period.
said this on the air one time, and I don't remember, some pinhead, maybe at Time or something, that said, Glenn Beck, he doesn't even know about individual rights. That's not, God gives creators. No, Congress creates rights. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Read your history. Sam Adams was the key. Back in a minute. Everybody in the audience today gets one of the T-shirts, the Faith Sam Adams T-shirt, and you can get yours online at glennbeck.com. And sign up for the Insider Extreme there at glennbeck.com. Continuing education, more information like this, documentaries, and so much more. glennbeck.com. From New York, good night, America.